Good morning, everyone out there. Um, this is a first, right? The week after football season is just, I don't know, men, like especially men that are very into football, are looking for things to do. And my friend Chris, we were talking. He has a podcast. He has a TikTok, pop culture phenomenon. It's incredible, right? So after a lot of discussion with Cottrell, Bill, bunch of people at Wire to Wire, Chris, we're opening Wire to Wire's platform to a very just new audience, keeping everything fresh. And one of the things that I think all of us enjoy was like wrestling and pop culture and things of that nature. So, what better way to just have a fun Sunday morning show than talking about TV dads? Now, y'all know me. I'm Gene Walzak. No NFL genius. This is not, I'm just Gene, just a guy, just Gene. But if you don't know already, this guy, pop culture phenomenon, that's him, right? He's a pop culture phenomenon. Chris from Coffee and Sports in the Morning, Coffee and K-Fob, little WWE action. The guy's a jack of all trades and a master of all of them also. Good morning, Chris. How you feeling?
Gene, it's great to be here. And let's be honest, once you open up this conversation, the nostalgia floodgates are just unstoppable at that point. So I'm really excited to get into this topic with you this morning. It's such a fun conversation because the conversation changes based on who you're talking to. Because everyone that has a favorite TV dad has a favorite TV dad for a different reason. And it's one show that impacted you. It's two shows that impacted you. And these are fun conversations to have because you might have a different perspective that I've never thought of before. So I could leave this conversation being like, maybe I should go back and rewatch that show because I missed that whole thing when I first watched that show 15 years ago. So these are conversations that never get old. They're always different. And I'm really excited to not only hear what you got to say, but what our listeners and watchers have to say as well.
I think it this way, right? Like, so when we did the overall names, we did best TV dad. That's literally what it is. Best TV dad. So you're not going to see Peter Griffin, right? Like, he's not a great dad, not a great father.
That's fair.
Homer Simpson will not be on this list. I don't think he's a great dad. And one controversial one, which I got from like a couple people, did you think Al Bundy was a good father?
He makes all the lists. And I think people confuse great TV dad with iconic TV dad. Yep. He is an iconic TV dad, not because he played the father role well, but because
that's my point.
Because he was a dad, he was on TV, and he's very memorable. That's why he gets thrown into those lists. That's the same reason Homer gets thrown into those lists, because he's iconic, not a great father.
And that's the thing, right? Like we try to eliminate all the bad fathers, right? If you're a bad dad, you're probably not going to be on this list. But we did have a little fun with the 16 seeds, and we'll get into that first, right? So I'm going to try to like unveil this in a fun way. So give me 1 second. I'm going to open this up, and then we're going to pop the screen share on, and hopefully you guys can see we just have one matchup here. We want to kind of unveil it. I said unveil. Wow, I'm going to wake up. Some of the more coffee in me. But we want to unveil each matchup. But before we get into the 116, we got to get into the 16 play-in game. It's March Madness, right? We couldn't fit 16. So we had animated characters, 2 of them, the best 2 that we put up there, best 2 father figures, in my opinion. Hank Hill from King of the Hill and Bob Belcher from Bob's Burgers. Chris, you being, a guy that is so like experienced in pop culture, I would love to hear your breakdown first, and I'm going to play off of yours. Who do you got? You got Hank Hill. God damn it, Bobby. Making sure Bobby stays out of trouble. Bob, small business owner, Bob's Burgers. Where are you going?
I'll take the Hank Hill side of this, and I'll allow you to take the Bob side of it. I think Hank falls into the category of dads, and we're going to see this a few times throughout the morning. He wants to be a good dad. He wants to do what's right for his son and his family, But at the same time, there's just some things that Hank isn't equipped to deal with. And part of that is growing up where he lives, right? Like it's part of that Southern culture that he's a part of. It's part of that beer drinking, gun shooting culture. And there's things he's comfortable with when it comes to Bobby. And then there's other things that, Bobby does during that show that he's clearly not comfortable with. But I think the reason he deserves to win this matchup, Gene, is because he pushes through his awkwardness and his uncomfortableness with his children to do what's best for them. And we've seen other dads, and they're not on this list for this reason, that don't do that. They choose not to do that. They choose to run away from the awkward space. And Hank doesn't. Is he a perfect dad? Absolutely not. Does he try his absolute best? Yes, he does, even though he is clearly flawed. But for me, that's why I'm taking Hank in this 16 seed matchup.
So I don't have to take Bob's side. I might take Hank's side also.
I just don't know Bob's side. I'm not a big Bob Burgers guy.
Oh, okay. Well, Bob, see, all right, I'll put it to you this way, right? Bob Belcher is the definition of the American dream.
Fair.
He owns his own burger shop, super nice guy, always there for his daughters, works for low money. They're always constantly struggling for income, but the whole family works there. His wife works there. His daughter works there. He's got child labor laws infractions. I don't know, right? Like, I don't think
he always seems happy. He always seems pretty joyful from what I've seen.
I love Bob. I'm a Bob guy. But if I had to pick one in this battle, I'm going Hank Hill. I mean, Hank Hill, single home, no row home. He's got his front yard. He's got his 3 friends he gets to hang out with daily. He's constantly keeping Bobby out of trouble. He's a propane worker. He's hardworking propane guy.
Loves propane.
Propane.
Loves it.
I'm going Hank Hill here. I'm going Hank Hill also. And it's going to be a sweep. Nothing against Bob. I just feel like that, why Hank's out there working to provide his kids a better life, Bob's forcing 12-year-olds to like serve burgers. And I just, at that point, I don't know if I could be okay with that.
And he never disowns Leanne, which I think a lot of dads in his situation would be tempted to with some of the shenanigans that she put him through, but he never does.
So I only got 1 vote for Bob's Burgers. For Hank Hill. He's not going to win, and that's okay. We're going to talk about Uncle Phil a little bit later in this bracket, but I'm going to be very clear when I say this. Let's start here, right? We're sweeping Uncle Phil here. He's the overall 1 seed. This is like Duke versus like Prairie. Like this is, North Carolina is going up against UPenn, like the Ivy League school that won the tournament. They're here. They're happy to be here. But Uncle Phil is just that guy. And I don't want to break out Lucille yet. We have multiple more rounds.
It's not time.
So I don't want to break out Lucille. So can we all, we're good with Uncle Phil sweeping the first round.
100%. Okay.
I just want to make sure. Let's put the votes in. Let's tally them up. I think it's like 50. Let's just go higher. 18-0.
Yeah.
All right. So 18-0. I just add them up. It's supposed to be 2, but Uncle Phil is just that guy. So the next round is very interesting. And some people, I don't know. My wife and kids, Michael Kyle, one of the most iconic scenes when he's talking to his son out in like the garage when he had to like kind of move out of the house and he didn't have his privacy. And he basically said, "Get out. I'm done. Get out." And it's a lot of tough love, right? He's a tough love guy. Him and his wife, they get in a couple, arguments on the show. It's probably every episode, but that's okay. Julius Rock is the quintessential from Everybody Hates Chris, the quintessential, hardworking guy. I don't want to piss my wife off. I'm going to go do my labor. I'm going to go home. I'm going to protect. I'm going to provide. Now, to me, this is about which one do you want to get into? Like, which father do you find that you relate to more? Is it the hard-nosed one that's involved in a lot of the interactions, or is it the muscle behind the mouth? Whereas Julius Rock is the muscle behind the mouth, the mother on the show. So I think that this is an interesting one. I'll lead off and then I'll pass to you. I'm going Michael Kyle here. I think he's the better overall father. I like fathers to take a good inkling, hard love with their kid's life. Looks like Big Germ, going in with Michael Kyle also. Maybe you could sway me. It's not locked in. I didn't hit the button. Chris, where are you going?
I'm not going to sway you because I'm going to go Michael Kyle as well. I think Julius is relatable. I think that growing up, you had a lot of households where mom was the common voice because dad was working. And you had a lot of households where if you got a little off the path and mom had to speak to dad, you knew that when dad walked in, he was going to go Julius Rock on you. And that's not something you wanted a part of. That's not something that you wanted to get yourself into, but it's very relatable. So I can understand how some people might relate to the Julius Rock experience more than the Michael Kyle experience. But to your point, Gene, if you're looking at the better father here, and there's nothing wrong with that role, right? And I'm not going to downgrade. If your dad was Julius Rock, you probably had a good dad. I'm not saying that's a bad role to play. There's times where if you're working 12, 14-hour shifts and you're barely home, and when you're home, you're sleeping, you don't have a lot of time to see the kids, you're going to take on that bit of an enforcer role. You're just not there enough because you're supporting and you're caring and you're providing for your family in different ways. So I'm not knocking that role. But for me personally, for what I can relate to better, it is Michael Kyle because he was more involved in the kids' lives. He had that opportunity to be more involved in the kids' life, building those relationships, impacting them inside and outside of the home. So I'm going Michael Kyle as well.
So we're sweeping, and I'll add Jeremy's vote just so he feels like he's part of it.
Put Jerem in there.
Big Germ. You know what's funny? Big Germ was the reason that me and him started this at work. It was a work discussion, and we were developing it. Like this is the brainchild of our notes together at work on a slow morning. I'm sorry if you're listening, buddy. Please don't listen to the podcast.
And then you cut him out? Like, I don't understand what happened here.
He's not a podcast.
Got it.
He's a personality, but not a podcaster. I love him. All right. So we already had an upset. A 9 over an 8. It's not considered a huge upset in the NCAA tournament, but the lower seed won. Now, in NCAA basketball, any March Madness tournament, one of the biggest scare tactics for a team is that high seeded 5 seed that's normally like a conference champion from a lower conference. Like they've won the Sun Belt, right? They won the Sun Belt. They only had 4 losses on the season, but they didn't play anybody. They didn't play a ton of people. And then you got the 12 seed. Where 12 seed's taking its bruises. It's taking its bruises. That's the team. It's a really good team. It's a Power 5 squad that, they had a bad season, but they won the conference tournament. Or they were a bubble team, and they're dangerous. These are dangerous teams. They had nothing to lose. Chris, I broke down the last 2 first. I would love you to break down Phil Dunphy versus Frank Lambert.
This is tough for me. I love Step by Step. I had Frank on the podcast. He started off season 2. It was awesome. It was so cool. Frank is
by the way, sorry to interrupt you. I just seen you had Corey's mom on the podcast.
Yes, that was
awesome,
really cool.
bro.
She's fantastic.
He sounds it.
All right, so Frank is interesting. He is a guy's guy, right? He owns a construction business, so he's got his own entrepreneurship thing going on. He has a really great relationship with his kids, but also at the same time, and I think this is going to play more of a role as we move on in this conversation this morning. Part of his character and part of his appeal was the fact that A, he's a good looking dude, and B, he also can't keep his hands off Suzanne Summers in that show. So a lot of what Step by Step was their relationship interwoven with what the kids have going on. Now, Frank is a guy where if someone gives JT or Al some trouble, he's going to be right there. Same thing with his stepkids. He's going to be right there defending them. At the same time, Frank is also that husband character that definitely takes a back seat to Suzanne. He definitely takes a back seat to Carol because he doesn't want that friction, right? So then I look at the other side and I see Phil, and my vote's going to go for Phil here, and here's why. I don't know if Phil's a better dad than Frank, but by golly gosh, he tries his goddamn hardest. And I think something needs to be said for the dad that has no shame, for the dad that doesn't care how stupid he looks, for the dad that wants nothing more than to, one, support his kids and be there for his kids and fit in with his kids, and wants his kids to also think that he is a cool dad. And you can call him a try hard and you can say he's doing too much, and at times he is. But if you look at Phil and Frank, there are things that Phil will do to try to relate to his kids that Frank never would, because it's out of Frank's character, right? Like, there's just a line that Frank is not going to cross. Doesn't make him a bad dad. It's just he's not doing it. Whereas Phil's there doing the High School Musical dance in the first episode of Modern Family. Phil's there trying to go onto the college campus to be there to support his daughter. Like, that's Phil. And Phil has a couple of moments, not nearly as much as Frank. Phil has the moment with the jeans guy, the weatherman, where he's going to go kick his ass because he realizes that he's trying to get into Haley's pants. He doesn't have a lot of those macho moments because that's not Phil. He's a nerd. He's a geek. But he's also someone that wants nothing more than just to be the best friend and the best dad for every single one of his children. And he tries to relate to all of them individually. And it's that effort level, even though it's a little much at times, that gives Phil the nod over Frank for me.
You're pouring it on hard for Phil here.
I
don't think, and I'm just being honest, I don't even think Phil has the best moment of the show.
Oh, he does. No, he doesn't.
And listen, I think one of the best quotes that Phil has is he was saying something that he's like, if I could be the nerdy father to everyone, like, I've done my job. If I could be the guy that comes in and friends look at him as the nerdy dad, I've done my job. And he's proud of that, right?
He is.
I think that this is where me and you are going to differ, right? And I think that where we differ is just the understanding of a father. And it's not, you're not wrong, I'm not wrong. It's just what Frank did was Frank was that hard-nosed guy, and he reminded me a lot more of my dad, right? Mm-hmm. And he reminded me of my dad because he would go to work constantly. He would beat up his body. He was a truck driver, delivered for Strowman and different places. And he would come home sore and tired after a long day's work. And I honestly relate to him a little bit more. And his kids' upbringing, particularly Al, right? It reminds me of mine. And I know I'm not a female, I get it, but the sports, being involved in everything that was going on in Al's life. I love his relationship with his nephew, Cody. I'm a big fan there. He lets his nephew, and my dad did this too. He let his nephew park his van in which he lived in the yard. My dad would allow people to stay at the house constantly. Somebody got kicked out of their situation. They were living in my basement. He was just that guy. He opened his door to anybody. And I think that the one thing that appeals to me most about Frank is how much he has to get involved in different family bickerings between Dana and Karen, and being involved in those situations where he's not the most prepared for, but he always comes through. And he might make a mistake, he might make a mess, he might blow his lid once in a while. And as far as the temper category, Frank's a little bit more anger management than Phil Dunphy.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go Frank here, right? So it's going to leave us as a tie. And so what I need is the first comment. If you're listening, not many people are listening right now. You don't listen later. So if you're listening, you literally have the chance to change this show. Are you voting for the 12 or the 5? Frank Lambert, Phil Dunphy. I need someone to comment. Kyle, Mel, Freddie. I don't care who is. Germ, get in there. Are you going Phil Dunphy or are you going Frank Lambert? Which is the best TV dad? And Phil, there it is.
My guy, let's go, Germ. Let's go.
Oh, it's back to back.
All right, Mel.
All right, so Phil's gonna move on, but I feel like this is a tough one. I'm giving Frank a vote. He's getting a vote.
I like it.
I got to go 3 though. I don't want to steal the listeners' votes. 3-1. All right, we got another one. I think this is an easy one, and I don't know how long we want, because we got a lot of matchups, right?
We do.
I think this is an easy one. Okay, break it down. Tell me on why this isn't as far off as I think it is.
Well, I don't know which way you're going to go, but I'm going Sandy Cohen. Sandy Cohen is one of my all-time favorite TV dads in the history of TV dads. Sandy literally, I mean, he's a public defender. That's what he does. He owned his own big fancy law firm, decided he didn't want to do that anymore, and he wanted just to help people. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty great example of a dad right there. Someone who gives up a lot of wealth to go basically not make a lot of money doing what he loves to do. And he rescues this kid. He rescues Ryan Atwood. He comes across this kid. He realizes that, his life was garbage and his life is going to continue to be garbage if he stays in the system. And he brings him home. And his wife, Kirsten, is not happy with it. She basically says, "You're bringing a criminal into our house." Kirsten comes from money. She's a good person too, but she comes from money, and she didn't like the idea of a 16 or 17-year-old criminal living with them. But he didn't care. He saw a moment. He saw the opportunity to impact someone's life. And I think he also realized that this would also help his own son, because his own son, Seth, was an introvert. He didn't have a lot of friends. He didn't get out there. And in his mind, he's like, listen, I'm going to save this kid and give him an opportunity. Hopefully he makes the most of it. I'm going to help my own son, because he needs somebody in his life that can help him get past his own social and emotional issues. And I'm going to take these two young men and we're going to make a better world out of it. And that compassion and that empathy is not shown a lot with TV dads in that way, because it's a weird space to get into. So the fact that the OC embraced that and kind of built the show around that, and not to mention, he is just a cool guy. I mean, just to have conversations with, just to see him out and about in his everyday life. I'm a big Sandy Cohen fan. I also love Tim. I'm taking nothing away from Tim. But I think if you're just comparing dad skills one-on-one here, because Tim was a good dad. Tim loved the sports stuff. Tim loved the rah-rah stuff. But Jill did most of the parenting.
Jill did all the parenting. The parenting.
Tim did like 2%. He had a couple of moments with Randy.
Yeah, but how many negative moments did he have? To pull it backward.
The entire show. He almost killed the kids like every third episode.
And that's my thing, right? Like with Tim, I feel like that he was a liability. I'm like, it's not close to me, right? Like Sandy was a good father. Tim was an overzealous, made a lot of mistakes, goofball. I actually, honestly, he would scare the crap out of me. If he was in charge of my kids for a weekend, I don't know if I'd be okay with that. Now, are you entrusting your kids to Sandy Cohen? Right. Are you entrusting your kids to Sandy Cohen? Sure. 100%. We can watch my kids. Tim the Toolman Taylor is trying to build a hot rod in the garage, and something's coming out of the garage. I don't know. He blew something up. I'm worried. I think he had a better impact on Brad than any of the three kids.
Yeah.
Because Brad was a little badass.
Yep.
But if we're being completely honest, I think this is a no-brainer. And I think it's a Sandy Cohen sweep.
And he didn't really relate to the youngest one, Mark.
No, not at all. Mark was very intelligent.
Yeah, Mark was smart and not sporty. So
I just added 9. We're gonna go 9 there. All right, so this is controversial, and this is a 3-4 team matchup that has the ability in some people's eyes to be an upset. I don't think it can be. I'm gonna start with this one, right? This is not a joke. I put this on my Facebook the other day. I think Carl Winslow could win this whole thing. And like Eric Taylor, clear heart, whatever. I messed it up. Can't lose. Blah, 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 blah. I don't care. He's a good football coach. He was out of the house way too often. Working 12 hours, 13 hours on the football field. His family's missing him. So Carl Winslow was not only a great dad to Laura, to drawing blank, Eddie. Jesus. Laura and Eddie, he was a stand-in father to Steve. And yes, he definitely had moments where he was pissed off at Steve. He wanted Steve out of his house. He said some mean things to him. But there's no bigger moment in Family Matters history when Steve is at school and he's left by himself. And he says, I'm feeling kind of left out. I have no family here. And one of the nerds from the nerdery comes right around the corner and goes, Steve, there's a man looking for you. And you just see that Carl Winslow come around the corner. Blue collar guy, fought against injustice. He's a role model in every way. I'm going Carl Winslow, and I don't think it's that close.
And Gene, clearly, while he's maintaining his household, he's also pretty good at his job because he gets a promotion in the show. He goes from the blue shirt to the white shirt. So, no, I mean, I think this is a landslide personally for me. Like you said, Eric was a really great football coach. And I think he had moments where he used his coaching to also be a good dad, but those were moments. Whereas Carl was consistently there and providing for his family and being there for all of his children. So it's not close to me. It's Carl.
Oh, we got 12-0. I'm just randomly assigning numbers for a win.
12 sounds great to me.
Now, the 11-6 is another one of those 12-5s. It's another one of the 12-5s. Me and you might differ here. I don't know. We don't know. We didn't talk about it. We didn't pregame these conversations. Dan was definitely had his faults, right? Dan Connor had his faults. And if you're talking about and I think this matchup played out perfectly. 6 versus 11. You have the goody two shoes, Mike Brady, like the Brady bunch, the family. Well, we love you, Marcia and Jan, and like super nice guy. And he had 3 boys of his own. And they're living in this beautiful single home. Obviously, they have some money pouring in. They're a very rich family. They have a maid.
Yeah, they have a maid who lives there.
If you go on the other side of the spectrum, it's the exact opposite. It's the hardworking guy that's supporting a mother that doesn't have a job. He's constantly out there, pulling doubles. He's tired, and he's a man's man. And I'll start here. I'm giving. See, Mel said it perfectly. Before this is probably one of the reasons. Mike Brady was a closet cheater. I'm with it, Mel. I'm going with the upset, guys. I'm going with the upset. Dan Connor, and if I have to, listen, I hope it doesn't get tied, but if it gets tied, I will pull the story out. I might be leaving the story for the next round because he's one of the most iconic moments in TV history. Look at this. I'd rather have Dan as my parent. He was so real when he carried that couch and threw it outside. Oh, I love Kevin.
In a vacuum, the better father here is Mike Brady.
Okay.
But we don't live in a vacuum. And the reason I'm going to vote for Dan is because Dan allowed you to see on TV every week that being a father is hard and that he doesn't always have the right answer. And he usually doesn't have the right answer, nor did Roseanne. And they would fight constantly over what the right answer was. And they would get it wrong sometimes, and they would have to go fix it. And things that they did would come back to bite them later on. And it was just real. And I will always defend Roseanne because it was such a relatable and real look at a family that was just doing what they had to do paycheck to paycheck to get by. And I don't know how.
This is my cousin. I love her. She's hilarious.
I don't know how you can walk away from Roseanne and just not see, a dozen things that are like, yep, that's relatable. And the Brady Bunch just wasn't. And now for what it was at the time when it came out, it made sense, right? That's what you needed, wholesome cookie cutter TV. But there comes a point, and it happened pretty quickly in sitcom TV, where you needed relatable and not cookie cutter. So I'm all on board for Dan Connor here.
Listen, Dan's moving on. I'm saving the story. I think I'm not going to use it anyway. We'll give Mike a vote. Mike gets a vote because he's a good human being, and because he's in the vacuum, he is the better dad on paper. All right, 7-10 matchups. These are fun. I'm going to be honest with you. I want to go second here again. I went first. I want to go second here because I don't know who I'm voting for right now. Right now, I'm still debating Danny Tanner or Red Foreman. Red was hilarious, right? Funnier dad. Funnier, probably a little bit more out of pocket. Single dad, Danny. He had a little help. Little help from his friends. Uncle Jesse Katsopoulos. Joey Gladstone.
Red is underrated as a dad because I think people get lost in the fact that he makes fun of his kids. He cusses at his kids. He calls his kids out for stuff. But at the end of the day, he's still parenting. Like, don't confuse the words he's saying with what he's actually doing. He is parenting. One of my favorite Red Foreman moments was when he was out of his job for those few episodes, and he was doing stuff around the house for Kitty. Now, he wasn't asked to. He was just taking care of the household because that's something that he believed that even though he wasn't working, he still needed to contribute and do something and hold up his own end. So there was part of the episode where Eric was like, why is the kitchen so clean? Mom hasn't even been around today. And he just it's not spoken. He just realizes that his dad did it. And like that's a moment, right? Like that's something where Eric realized, oh, dad's still putting an effort. Dad's like just cleaning the house because he's home. Like it wasn't something where it was a whole speech where his dad was like, if you're home, you should, you know what I mean? Like it was unspoken. It was quick. It was simple, but it shows what Red was doing as a role model for the kids. Now, as far as Danny goes, I know that Danny gets a lot of hate. He was definitely ADHD. I think there was definitely some neurotic qualities when it came to Danny Tanner, and I get that. But at the end of the day, you know, the situation that he was in, losing his wife, having the 3 girls, I know that he had help. I understand the house was a gorgeous house, probably worth tons of freaking money. I get all of that, right? But think about it from a realistic stance. You lose your wife, you have 3 daughters. Yeah, Joey and Jesse come to help you out. You're 3 guys that don't really have a damn clue. I mean, and to figure it out, to get through it, to raise those 3 girls. I mean, for now, I'm going with Danny, and I love Red, and I love some of the things he did as a parent. But in this situation, I got to go Danny Tanner.
See, this is where I feel like the best dad and like more entertaining dad are different, right? Yeah. I think Danny was the best dad out of the 2 dads here. The love and support he gave to DJ, Stephanie, and Michelle, as hard as he worked to help them, he cleaned up around the house. I think Red's way more entertaining. And Red has the most famous line, like, I want to be buried face down. Like, love the line. And I love Red. Danny was very cookie cutter, very privileged.
Yes.
Ton of money. He had a brother-in-law and a friend that were paying rent to help him stay in that huge house. He had a really annoying neighbor, Timmy. But I think he's the better dad, right? And like, what are we doing? We're doing best dad, right? And our definition of best TV dad might be different than your definition of TV dad. I think Danny's the better dad. And Red's funnier and Red's more entertaining. And if I'm watching, and by the way, I think the one part that almost swayed me away from Danny Tanner is, do you remember where you were at or what you were doing the first time you heard Bob Saget do stand-up?
That's terrible.
but like that was like a moment for me, guys. I don't think people realize how much of a moment that was. Like, we were so used to Danny Tanner. And then you see Bob Saget do stand-up, and within the first 3 minutes, you're like,
it's jarring.
Oh my God.
You don't know where you are. You don't know what you're watching. You're confused.
I don't think we need to. I think we're going to be unpopular, but we got to do the right thing. And looks like from all the comments that Red would have won any type of vote off. But I'll do this. Make it a really close game. 4-3. Danny Tanner takes the win. All right, 215. This is debatable if Walter White's even a good father.
Correct.
I think for a season and a half, he's a great father. But the development of Walter White into being an egomaniac, murderer, drug dealer oversees that. Now, the reason he's on this list is because the reason he gets into the whole distribution of selling drugs is for his family. He needs to be able to provide for his family. Now, granted, that takes over his entire existence.
Yes.
I think Alan Matthews is top 4, top 3 TV dads of all time. Could be one, right? The moment that Alan had in the hospital with the guy, the coach guy that was trying to get Sean.
Mr. Mack.
Yeah, Mr. Mack. That was it. The moment he had in that where he shoved him against the wall and he goes, I will kill for him. He's the best friend my son has ever had. Great father, 3 children. And then if you little annexation, 4th child with Sean, who was constantly there. This is Alan. It's not that close.
Don't forget, they had a baby season 6 or 7.
Yeah. So we go 5 children.
Yeah. I'm saving my Alan tidbits for later on. I think it's Alan in a landslide. So
yep. Let's blow it up. All right. So, Chris, I'm going to let you choose. Do you want to go bottom back up? Because we just didn't really get into Alan Matthews. You want to start from the top each time?
Let's go Alan.
All right. Now, see, for everything I said that was great about Danny last round, and for all you guys that are sitting here saying Red should have made it, this is the end of the road for either one of them. Neither one of them were surviving the Alan Matthews wave. I'm a fan of Alan. I think he's a man's man. He's from outside of Philadelphia. Philadelphia guy myself. He's got a little hometown advantage. I don't remember an episode where I didn't at least understand Alan's perspective. Even the fight with him and Eric about basketball, or him and Corey about basketball. I understood it. He sometimes parented strict, but I loved it, right? Philly guy, Alan Matthews. Yes, that's the root of it. No, Alan Matthews is on everybody's list of top 4 dad. I'm going Alan Matthews here. It's not that close. Danny Tanner, as well as he was a father, he did have support from 2 other father figures in the house. And then you add Rebecca. So now you have a third father or parent figure in the house. Nothing against Danny. Danny was good enough to pass Red, but this is an Alan Matthews show.
The thing with Alan is, and this was a little bit what Dan Connor has going for him, is you got to see the struggle of a parent. You got to see actual conversations with him and Amy of like, well, how do we handle this? And they would kind of push back and forth on each other, and then they would go handle it. You got to see, Alan, he was a grocer when the show began, and you got to see him, talk a lot about, it's money's tight. They often had conversations about how are we going to pay this month, or we got to cut back on this. And then, hours got cut at the store, and, he didn't feel fulfilled in his job. That's real stuff, right? Yeah. All the while, those things are being interwoven with his kids, because Eric worked at the store for a little bit. And, Eric wants to drop out of school and become a weatherman. And Alan's like, you need to go to college. You need to be more than I was. And not all dads can have that conversation with their kid. Not all dads can say, I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be better than me. Because most kids grow up idolizing their fathers, and they want to be just like them. So for a dad to come out and be like, I don't want you to be just like me. You can be more than I was. That's powerful. The other thing I liked about Alan is that he could acknowledge when he effed up. The alcohol thing with Corey and Sean, where he blamed Sean for all of Corey's problems. And Corey's like, no, Dad, I felt like garbage. I stole the liquor from your cabinet. And immediately he goes to Sean and he goes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said that to you. Because he knew he screwed up. And he didn't care that he was wrong. He would fix it. And again, not a lot of parents do that. So I think that for all those reasons, it has to be Alan here. Danny had moments. He always had great advice. He was always there for his girls. He always loved his girls, but it never went past that with him. That's what he was. It was always that one trick for Danny over and over again as a parent. You never saw any other layers, whereas Alan has like 8 or 9 different layers.
I think that the Full House, and before we leave this, because we're in Alan 1, but I think Full House is like the closest like bridge show from what we were just talking about with the Brady Bunch.
Yes.
Right. Like
Yep.
there's so many musical conversations where you have like the deep intrinsic music where Danny is sitting down with Michelle on the bed and how she needs to do this and that, or talking to Stephanie about, and like one of my favorite episodes of Full House ever is the spelling bee, Stephanie Tanner spelling bee. And it's a great lesson that people need to understand. You might not always be the best at something, and you have to be gracious in defeat. You have to understand that you're not always going to be the best. There's going to be someone better than you. It's a real good lesson in humility. And there's a lot of lessons you could learn from Full House, but learning about how to struggle with day-to-day life and learning how to be able to acknowledge your faults as a father. Alan Matthews in a landslide here. All right. So we're kind of moving. We're moving down, and we only got like 6 more matchups total. This one, everything that we love about Dan Connor, I think Carl is just like, so like, you ever heard the expression like Michael Jordan light or baby Shaq?
Yep.
Like, I'm not, obviously it's 2 different worlds, but like, I feel like Dan Connor would be like Carl Winslow light. He's like the unrefined Carl Winslow. Now, listen, granted, Dan is a man's man father. Carl, has the higher morality. Carl would never get caught into a domestic dispute, or not that he hit Roseanne, but that he would get into an argument in which the police are called because of an argument. Carl would sit on his sword, take the high road. And for that reason, I think Carl Winslow is the easy pick here.
Yeah, I agree. It's also worth noting, and I think this gets lost on Family Matters sometimes, is that they very much established early on that even though the house is nice and it is a nice home, they are constantly in those first few seasons referring to money. We don't have money to do this. It's not wise to use our money on this. So you very much kind of get the image that the focus for this family was to buy a home for their children and to give them a nice home to grow up in. And they're still very financially aware of their situation. Because keep in mind, Carl is, when the show starts, he's just a cop. Cops don't make a ton of money. And we don't really know what Harriet does. She works in some sort of business. But just because the house is a decent looking home, you never get the idea they're swimming in money. And I think that's important to remember, because shows kind of lose a little bit of the ability to have that hard conversation with you when it clearly looks like you're living in $1 million home. So, and I think that's part of the issue of Full House, right? Like Full House wanted you to really believe that they were struggling and whatnot. But then you look at the house they're in, you're like, God damn.
They're doing all right.
They're doing okay for themselves. I agree. I think Dan has a lot of the qualities that Carl has. But when it comes to being a great father, you need to know the morality is always going to be there, because that's what the kids look for. That's what the kids look for. You go to Dan and you think 9 times out of 10, Dan's going to do the right thing. But damn, when he does the wrong thing, whoo-hoo, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't have that issue with Carl. Carl is always going to be the role model that his kids need. And if you're just talking about being a good dad and you're not talking about being a layered character or a flawed human being or someone relatable to, you got to go with Carl here. It's closer than people think.
I think it is too. So what I'll do is I'll give, like a 7-3 matchup. It's like a touchdown to a field goal.
I like it.
But the one thing I want to leave Dan Connor with, because he's going to be no longer existing in this tournament, is the Crime and Punishment episode, which is, in my opinion, the best episode of Roseanne ever. It's real life stuff. It's one of the first time they really touched on real domestic violence on TV. Jackie was beat up by Fisher, which was then her boyfriend. and she's crying in the kitchen, and Roseanne's holding her on her arm, and Roseanne tells Dan what happened, and he goes, or he had Fred Flintstone vibes. Is she really okay?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah. She's like, Roseanne's like, yeah. And then you see Dan walk out, grab his hat, put on his jacket, and then the next scene you see him come back with chicken, and he's hiding, wrapping his hand in ice. And one of the funniest lines of the show, like, you're in serious mode at this point, where it's like, did you kill him and then buy chicken? And his response was, no, I bought the chicken first. It's such a great line. I had to give it its play. Dan deserves his roses, right?
He does.
Just Carl Winslow is incredible. All righty. This is a 4-5 matchup that just I love this 4-5 matchup because it means so many different things. So I'll let you break it down. I've been breaking down the first few, but this is a really good matchup. I might be a listener vote. If you're listening, pay attention. You might have pull.
This one's tough because I think you're looking at two dads cut from a similar cloth, but the execution is just vastly different. So I think both dads view themselves as cool dads. I think both dads have even said in their shows, I'm a cool dad. It was cooler when Sandy said it, obviously. But I think they both kind of view themselves in the ilk of that cool dad. They both view themselves in the ilk of, I will do whatever I need to do in the moment to relate to my kid. A little different with Phil because his kids were younger at various points in the show. And Sandy's dealing with, high schoolers from the start. Then college students. So age difference, it looks a little different. At the end of the day here, I lean Sandy. And the reason that I lean Sandy is because if you're going to say they're kind of cut from the same cloth and they're both want to be the cool dad and they both want to do everything they can for their kid and they neither has issue with, crossing the line or making an area gray or looking stupid for their kid, you then have to look at, well, who did it better then? And I think Sandy has more successes in that arena than Phil did. And it's almost an unfair comparison because of the age of the kids and the subject matter of the kids. And I think Sandy was set up to be more successful in that arena. But we can't go back and change the scope of TV shows for this conversation. So you look at what you have to look at. And also, I give Sandy a nod as well because if you look at Phil, his wife was always a consistent rock for him. So he always had that to fall back on. You look at Sandy, Kirsten had a drug problem. And
I love you.
In case you didn't know, they had to send Kirsten to rehab. Like there was a point where, he lost his other parenting half. And she had to go fix herself and he had to be a part of that process. So, and that affects you as a father, right? You go from being a co-parents to being, it's just you, mom's off fixing herself. And I get it. They were older, they were teenagers, but that's still part of it. Whereas as a parent, Phil never lost Claire for X amount of time. Claire was always there. So it's close, but I'm going Sandy here.
All right. So we talk in the NCAA tournament all the time about fatigue, right? And Phil Dunphy is just coming off an overtime win over Frank Lambert. And I think that, I somewhat jokingly, but I think that everything that Chris brought up is accurate, right? It might not have been his fault, but Sandy was the better overall father. And I'm going Sandy also. I thought this might be an argument for contention. I didn't know where you were going, but I'll give Phil one. He gets one. It's overtime. It just, he was in that situation. Low scoring game. This might not be as low scoring game.
This is going to be close.
Guys, every list that you ever do, as far as best TV dad, James Avery is literally at the top of them. And I'm not sure if he wins this tournament because me and Chris are, we're different people, right? But Uncle Phil was a model of citizenship He was a great role model. He raised 3 kids and then 4 with Will. And if I've heard the comparisons before. Well, he was rich and he had the rich house and Bel Air. But little do you know, Uncle Phil worked his way up to that richness.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a farmer. Remember his farming name, Chris?
No, what was his farming
Zeke.
name? That's
Zeke.
right. That's right. That's right.
Zeke used to be wearing the suspenders. Pictures of him as a kid working on the farm with the pigs. Uncle Phil was it. Built his way up to judge status. And nothing against Michael Kyle, but Michael Kyle has his slip-ups. He has his moments. Uncle Phil is almost above reproach. So
And
Uncle
let's
Phil,
not forget, he owned his own law firm. He was a partner at his own law firm before he became a judge. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he had that whole story, that whole background. So it wasn't just like they put a rich black family on TV and they're like, well, here they are. They're just rich. No, you knew that Uncle Phil had the build up to that, which is why he could have those conversations with Will, because he knows where Will came from. He knows the life that Will was put in Bel Air to avoid in West Philadelphia. So he could easily relate to anything that Will felt about his upbringing or his life or his future, because he lived it. He walked it, got out of it, became successful. He literally was what Will wanted to be, which was rich and successful with all the honeys, as Will would call them. So that is Uncle Phil, and he did it beautifully. And James Avery, I mean, you can't say enough great things about him.
I'll never forget. I love watching like behind the scenes when they had the Fresh Prince of Bel Air and they were talking about how, I forget the name of the show, but it was like the reunion and it was on HBO Max. And when Will Smith was telling a story about how James Avery helped him through one of his acting moments, and he grabbed him, he hugged him, and he said, "That's acting, kid." Like just the way he was on the stage, the presence he was. And, he had to deal with a change of wife that we just didn't mention at all. One season we had a brand new wife, and we're going to pretend that Aunt Viv was just totally different. She went from like a dark skin to a light, dark skin, hard working woman to like a very light skinned house. And we just pretended that was one of the worst switches. I'm not saying like either Aunt Viv is bad, but like, I don't like when shows make you pretend that we just didn't know what just happened. Like, do you remember the movie Major League when they replaced the center fielder, Willie Mays Hayes, and they just went from, I think it was like Eddie Murphy to not Eddie Murphy, Wesley Snipes to Omar Epps. They just like we didn't know. Just like one off season, Wesley Snipes turned into Omar Epps. But I'm not breaking out Lucille yet. I don't need to break out Lucille. Chris is talking about when Uncle Phil goes to the pool hall. Listen, Lucille's in the bag. She's waiting.
It's coming.
By the way, just quick opinion. What did you feel? I'm sure you watched it. What did you feel of the like the spin-off, like the secondary one on Peacock, like the redo of the Fresh Prince of Bel Air?
It was an interesting take on it. I mean, as a standalone show, it was fine. Like if you go into it because you loved the original and you want to love this just as much, you're not going to.
Yeah.
But as a standalone thing, it was done well.
See, I think the most crazy like acting plot twist was Jeffrey being the hitman butler. Like that just was different to me, man. I just didn't expect that. All right, so it might be time. It might be time to break out Lucille.
It might be.
Danny Cohen's a great, great dad, and taking in a child that's not yours, and Uncle Phil did that. Like I don't want to like.
No, he
Uncle
did.
Phil did that.
It was family, though. To be fair, it was family.
That's fair. That is fair.
He didn't take it a criminal. Just saying.
there's too many Uncle Phil moments for me. There's too many situations, and I kind of breaking out Lucille was one of the funniest ones. Like Will has no idea. He gets hustled at this pool hall. Uncle Phil comes in there. He goes, I want the my keys to my car back. And he goes, there's a matter of $300. Like, I'm not giving you squat. It's like, you could play for it, Uncle Phil. And he plays the idiot real well. He's like, oh yeah, you just got to put the balls in the hole. Simple geometry. Goes in there and gets his ass handed to him the first game and gets the stakes raised. He ends up walking out of there with $600. I think it was 600. I'm pretty sure it was 600. $600 and the car back. And Will and Carlton are sitting there amazed, not understanding what just happened. Jeffrey break out Lucille, and Jeffrey pulls out the pool cue from his pants. I don't know how he was hiding it in there that long, but no, Uncle Phil is. There's only a guy or two I could listen to an argument to beat Uncle Phil on this list, and Sandy Cohen's not that guy.
There's moments, right? So I think if you compare what they did as a father, you'd be very, very similar. You'd be in the same room with what they did as a father figure. But then when it's the same conversation, when you get into any of the greatest of all time and you're all in the penthouse, now you have to split hairs to figure out how we're going to line them up in the penthouse. And when it comes to Uncle Phil and Sandy just doesn't have the moments that Uncle Phil has. The jailhouse scene where he goes to the jail because the boys were arrested because they were black and they were driving in a nice car. And Aunt Viv has her moment. And then the officer starts to disrespect Aunt Viv. And Uncle Phil blows up. But he blows up in control. He blows up in a way where it's like a lion roaring, right? And even though he's yelling, you're still captivated by what he's saying. And he's basically telling them that, this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do it right now. And if you don't, here's what I'm going to do to you. The scene with Will and his father, when his father leaves, that scene could have played so many ways. And many people look at that scene and they praise Will's acting job, which I agree deserves praise. But don't forget what James Avery did in that scene. Don't forget the role that Uncle Phil played in that scene, because once Will does his thing and he has his monologue and he's like, why doesn't he want me, man? There's a moment there, and the embrace. And the thing I love most about that moment is during their embrace, he flips the hat off Will's head. Like, it's such a little thing that you don't think really matters, but it does, right? Because in his mind, that's a barrier from him getting closer to Will. And that's just such a little thing that shows that moment, that bond between them. So because Uncle Phil has more of those moments than Sandy does, I put Uncle Phil ahead of Sandy.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that scene was almost completely. I know that some of it was scripted, but I'm almost sure that they said on the reunion that it was almost 100% ad lib. And
so Will had a script, and he ran through it. According to Jeffrey, he ran through it the day before, and they watched him do it in run through. And Will had the freedom to take the beats the way he wanted to on filming day, and that's what he did. So he knew where he needed to go, and he knew what comment points he had to hit. But Will did make it his own from rehearsal the day prior to the actual filming day. So yeah,
I think that that moment with Uncle Phil and Will is one of the best in television history, and it still brings tears to my eyes because you can see the pride in Will. He's like, I got my first haircut without him. I made my first basketball team without him. I got my first honey without him. And I'm going to be a damn better father than he'll ever be. And you can start to see the emotion go from ego to humility to sadness. And just the way that Uncle Phil hugged him. The grip, the passion, the intensity of the hug. Like it hit. It hit perfect. So we're going to have an incredible finals. If Sandy 4. Just keeping it, fun.
Keep it there. Keep it there.
This is, I'm almost sure, judging by your statements earlier in the show and judging by my feelings of this is going to be a fan vote. This is going to be a fan vote. I just want you guys to be warned. The moment we say go, the next comment, because I know it's going to be a fan vote. Because I'm going Carl, and I think you're going Alan. And I'm not trying to give it away, right? We talked about both these actors at length. I'm going to give my sales pitch to Carl real quick. We'll do like a 30-second sales pitch on both. I know where you're going. The moment he walked in for Steve, I got chills up my spine. The amount of trouble that he got out of. And if you remember when Laura finally comes around to Steve, finally, no, I don't want to be with Stefan. I want to be with you. I love you. I can't imagine life without you. How supportive Carl was of Laura's decision, even though he thought Stefan was the better fit for Laura. When Eddie wanted to join the police academy and he took him to the police bar and told him this guy got shot in the head 3 times. This guy over here lost his partner in a high-speed chase. It's not all the glitz and glamour you think it is, Eddie. Like, I just want to let you know what you're getting into. Carl Winslow was morality. Carl Winslow was leader. And Carl Winslow was a dad that I could be proud of. Not saying Alan Matthews wasn't, but my pitch is to Carl Winslow. 35 seconds. I went over my time. You got it.
I love the morality of Carla Winslow, but what I liked about Alan and why I think Alan should get the nod here is, although Carl always led it with morality, Alan did it. Not saying Alan didn't have morality, but I felt like Alan's conversations with the kids, whether it was telling Eric to be better than he was, whether it was the relationship and the impact that he had on Sean and bringing Sean into the family and raising Sean, essentially. I mean, the episode where Turner's in the hospital, who's there for Sean? It's the Matthews family. When Sean's father passes away, which is one of the most heartbreaking episodes of Boy Meets World, who's there for Sean? It's the Matthews family. And it's those little things. And I know that Carl didn't have an opportunity. I mean, he had Steve. And I guess you could say in a lot of ways he did raise Steve. But Steve did have parents. And we didn't see them. I think we saw them once. But for what he did to Sean, just because the fact that he looked at it and said, my son thinks you're worth that. And because of the way I value my son, I value you equally. Like that, it just hits different for me. And I know that people will look at Alan and be like, well, he did that for someone else that wasn't his. He did it for his kids too, though.
Yep.
And there's just not a lot of men out there that would look at a situation and be like, oh, my kid vouches for you, so I roll with you. And I roll with you like you're my own. And that's the one thing with Alan that I always go back to, because it just hits different. And it touches me. And again, we all see things differently, and different things impact us differently. And for me, that's what it was with Alan Matthews. So that's where
Alan was great. Carl was great. I'm okay with either one of them moving on.
As am I. I'm not dying on the Alan Matthews hill.
The top 3 are the top 3.
Yeah.
The 3 that are left are the 3 that are left. What was why? Now, by the way, I'm going to open voting. Next vote. The next votes. Next comment we see. Alan Matthews, Carl Winslow wins this round. But while we're waiting for that, and I don't want to, guys are typing, they're a little bit delayed. What was the most emotional moment to you during Boy Meets World? Because I remember mine. Like the most emotional moment to me was when Topanga moved to Pittsburgh and Corey's sitting outside with Eric, and Eric doesn't know what to do. And he's like, he's broken. And you could see it in his face. And it's some of the greatest acting Fred Savage has put on, right? He's sitting out there broken. And Eric's like, I don't know what to do. I want to be here for you, bud. And he goes,
that whole episode was done well, because also in that episode you have Sean, who is like, she's not going to leave.
Yeah,
she's not going to leave. They never leave, and then she leaves, and Sean's just like, she's going to come back. Like there's no way the world would take her away from you, and then she doesn't come back. But for me, it's got to be the Feeney moment in the classroom where he's saying goodbye to all the kids, and he has the moment with each of them. So
that's a great moment. I didn't know what Feeney moment you were talking about. He has so many of them. I need your vote. Somebody, one of you guys that are listening right now, Alan Matthews or Carl Winslow, I need your vote. I know it's close. Kevin, Chris, Kyle, Cottrell, anybody in the chat, I need your vote, because this to me is one of those ones where I don't think me or Chris can make this decision on our own. So who is it? Carl Winslow, Alan Matthews. Give it to me. Boy Meets World was my favorite show of all time. Alex Elmore dropped in Alan Matthews. That's going to be our winner for this round. Boy Meets World was my favorite show of all time.
mine too.
But to me, and I love Boy Meets World, but to me, I think that Carl might have been the second or third biggest star on his show. Maybe first. It was Urkel, and then it was Carl, in my opinion. Whereas Alan might have been the fourth or fifth. That's kind of why I went with Carl. But Alan won. Alex Elmore, you are the one that made the decision here. So you're sending old Carl home in a 4-3-7 game series. And we go to the finals. And it's been a fun episode, guys. It's been a very fun episode. Having these two as your final two, you can't argue with it. You can't. They're great, great, great people. I think that either one of any of us would have been lucky to have TV dads or fathers like these two TV dads. Uncle Phil, Alan Matthews, you might have got me to sway a tad towards maybe, possibly. I know you wouldn't have did it, but I might have listened to a Carl Winslow campaign. I love Alan Matthews. Like I said, fourth or fifth biggest character on the show. I think Feeney was the best father figure on Boy Meets World, and he wasn't a father. Not saying Alan wasn't. Alan's great. I'm not discrediting Alan, but we're splitting hairs here in the finals. Uncle Phil was a father. He was an uncle. And if I had to give him one piece of criticism, like I'm going to try to criticize both of them. I'm trying. Alan was the fifth guy on the show. Okay. Uncle Phil's over spoiling of Hillary did not set her up for the most success, in my opinion. That's the only bit of critique I can give Uncle Phil, but did a bang up job with Carlton. Ashley, great job. And then, by the way, they had a baby in this at the end of it too. So I don't want to there's more. There's obviously more, but the way he turned Will into the young man that you can respect, and the way he was there. And even when Will was willing to throw away his relationship with Uncle Phil for his dad, the way Uncle Phil still fought for him. I don't know, man. He's different. And I'm really sad that James Avery is no longer with us. Rest in peace, James Avery. But my vote on this final round is for Uncle Phil, and I will digress the rest of the show to you, my friend.
I don't know, and I've thought about this before. I don't know what TV dad has a legitimate argument against Uncle Phil. If I look at everyone on our list, even the ones that I talked about extensively, I wouldn't take over Uncle Phil. I wouldn't take Alan over Uncle Phil. I wouldn't take Carl over Uncle Phil. I wouldn't take Sandy over Uncle Phil. So I don't know what dad would have the best argument to take down Uncle Phil. And a lot of that has to do with the writing. He was just written so well, and his impact across the show was so far reaching. It's funny because he was only Uncle Phil to one person. Everyone else on that show, he was dad. He was Philip Banks. But we know him best as Uncle Phil because of the relationship he had with Will, because of the impact that he had on Will. I don't know, the moments you can't get past. Every dad had big moments, but I feel like his were bigger. He always commanded the screen when he was on it, when he was having one of his moments. You never felt like, sometimes you feel with TV dads, the moment is too much for them and they're overreaching to get to the moment. Never felt that way with James Avery. When he was having a moment, you knew he was having a moment. You were invested in the moment, and you couldn't take your eyes off the screen. And he had moments with other people than just Will. He had moments with Carlton. He had moments with Hillary. He definitely had moments with Ashley when she was a little bit younger. So for me, it's Uncle Phil hands down. It's crazy if you think about it, because we knew he was going to be the favorite coming in. And I thought through the hour we were here this morning, we would develop something comparable to go against him. And we really didn't. We developed a great argument for number 2.
Yeah.
Between Carl and Alan and Sandy and a couple of others, but we didn't really develop anything to take down Uncle Phil, which maybe that's the way it should be, Gene. Maybe there just isn't one to take down Uncle Phil.
Sometimes the Yankees have to win the World Series.
Right.
The best team doesn't always win, but like the Yankees sometimes win the World Series. And this is one of those things where the heavy favorite, I'm not talking about now, obviously baseball's evolved a ton, but for years, the Yankees were the best team in baseball. They had the highest payroll, and they just literally were an unbeatable machine. And I think Uncle Phil is very reminiscent of Tom Brady, the 90s or 70s or 30s Yankees. Yeah, the Jordan Bulls. By the way, I wore this for you. Finkel is Einhorn. But yeah, Uncle Phil's gonna win this. And I'm gonna wrap this up. I'll give Alan 3. Uncle Phil is your winner. I'm gonna stop sharing. And we're gonna wrap up. It's been a fun hour and 15 minutes. I didn't know how long this would last. I figured it would be a fun, but like I want to do these maybe once a month. We can just create a different bracket for something different in pop culture. But I love listening to you and listening to your takes and listening to some of your interviews. I don't get to see them all, but when I see them on TikTok, or like I just seen the one yesterday with Corey's mom. I forget her name.
Betsy Randall. Gene, I'll tell you the TV mom conversation, completely different.
See, all right. So like if we did the TV mom thing, I was trying to like put this together, right? If we did the TV mom thing, who do you think would be the overall 1 seed?
It's tough because you're looking at generations.
Yeah.
Because like look at Carol Brady, for example. Many
Correct.
people would have her as number 1. And even in today, you look at it and you can acknowledge that Mike Brady was cookie cutter and the Brady Bunch was the goody goody two shoes. But at the same time, don't you want that from mom? So you look at it today and you're like, I don't hate her because of that. Whereas we take Mike down for being too goody goody. I don't think we view moms the same way. So it's an interesting dynamic because it's not as clear cut with the moms. And, you know, Kevin's laughing at Roseanne in the chat, but at the same time, Roseanne was real. Like Roseanne was just out there doing her thing. And Roseanne is so relatable to people growing up. A lot of us had moms or knew of moms similar to Roseanne. So that relatability factor comes in there as well.
I'll tell you one that I think that would be close to a number 1 seed on my eyes. And listen, you know, Chris Hackney mentioned it earlier, and I didn't really give it a lot of play. I want to be very clear. Bill Cosby's not on this list because Bill Cosby is a scumbag.
But his wife.
That's exactly where I'm going. Claire Huxtable. I think that would be someone that would be close to that 1 seed. And this was my reasoning for bringing that up. Look, Bill Cosby on the Cosby Show, and if you just take the TV show for what it was a great father, would 100% made the top 16, 17 list. But I just can't ignore the things that happened outside. I don't want to give that man any play. That was the
same
reason.
Thing goes with I've done earlier incarnations of this list, and for a while my list contained Eric Camden from Seventh Heaven.
Yeah,
but things have come out about Stephen Collins since, and you can't look at that and be like, this is the guy that we wish was our father, because it's hard. It's hard to separate the two. So it's better just to not touch it at all, in my opinion.
And another fun thing is we'd get a lot more animated moms, like Marge Simpson.
Yes. Yep.
We would get a lot more animated moms because they're the ones that are normally holding it together while the idiot husbands
Correct.
doing something stupid. Like I probably wouldn't have Lois that far up there. She's done a lot of really bad things, but like Marge Simpson, very good mom.
Yep.
But it was fun talking pop culture with you, man.
Yes.
Went an hour and 20 minutes, hour 15 minutes. Appreciate everybody's comments in the chat. RJ keeps saying Al Bundy because he wanted Al Bundy on the list. I don't think Al Bundy was a great TV dad. Great person. We talked about that earlier though. But thank you guys.
Thing, Gene, to think about is a lot of the TV moms that were opposite of the great TV dads may not be there.
That's fair. That's fair.
Because how many great TV mom dad duos actually exist out there where you think both were equally as great? I bet you it's few and far between. Because TV rules, there's 22 minutes, there's only a certain number of lines, and you usually don't give them to both parents.
Well, you're right. You got me thinking now. Which Aunt Viv would you choose if you had a choice?
Yeah,
100%. You said that
not
so
even
quick.
close.
I'm with you. I just didn't know if
not
you
even close.
Yeah.
Aunt Viv lost her voice when they changed actors.
100%. You couldn't say that better. I just wanted to get your quick opinion on that. So the OG Aunt Viv might make the list.
She might.
Do you remember she was teaching? Do you remember she was teaching the class that Will was in? She ended up like getting involved in the school, and she was teaching. What was she teaching? Was she teaching Black history?
She was teaching Black history. She did a ballet thing because she was a ballet dancer in real life.
I loved it. But where are we gonna see you next? Are we seeing you tomorrow morning on Coffee and Sports?
Where are you seeing me next? Today's Sunday. Yes, tomorrow morning, Coffee and Sports. We're breaking down the NBA All-Star Weekend.
9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in, Coffee and Sports. Chris and Mo. It's one of the best shows. If you haven't listened to it, take it on your ride to work. If you got a break in between after you're done your inventory in the morning and you're sitting down, put on Coffee and Sports. Chris and Mo are a great pair. I'm Gene Walzak. You'll see me tomorrow night on Cheap Seats Podcast. That's Chris Olmstead or Chris from Coffee and Sports in the Morning. And we had a fun time. We are signing out.